Welcome to my board breaker tier list for the September-October 2023 format. We have Age of Overlord coming out pretty soon, but I still want to showcase what you can expect and what I think may still be the case post Age of Overlord. There are a lot of cards here that actually have fallen off and some are actually really popular, so let's get straight into it. I want to talk about Alpha, the Master of Beasts, which is a actually really good board breaker, but the issue is a lot of end boards do not rely solely on the monster zone. What you're effectively doing is only solving half of the problem or a third of the problem, where some decks also have, hand trap disruption, field spell disruption. So I'm going to put Alpha the Master Beast in D tier. Again, it's a really cool card. The concept of Alpha is actually really amazing, and maybe one day it will get popular again. I just don't think that's right now. So the book cards have apparently lost a lot of popularity because of Kashtira Fenrir being banned, but purely is still really good, probably one of the best decks, and so the books are great against them. Eclipse can get Ash Blossom, so I'm actually going to go ahead and put Eclipse in the A tier because I do think that is going to be something a lot of players have to deal with. And remember, when cards are flip face up in the end phase, it's not just the cards that Eclipse put face down. I do think Bookman has a much better place, and for the most part, because Kashtira Fenrir is banned and the problem cards are purely, there's only 1 or 2 monsters that they have in the field anyway. And in most cases, booking the right card will end their turn, and I do think it's better. Also, booking your own cards when it's your opponent's turn is just super awkward, and so again, S tier card for the current format. Let's move on to Change the Heart, which I want to put in S tier. I just think stealing someone's monster is outrageous. It does lose to anti-spell fragrance and the virus, which did not get banned. So I'm still going to put in S tier because I do think it's great for the Unchained matchup. There are some matchups where you will steal a monster, for example, a Dragonlink player's Borderland Dragon, and then just ruin their days. So I think when people think of board breakers, Evenly and Dark Ruler come to mind, and so I'm going to put Dark Ruler in the A tier simply because it doesn't deserve an S. Because like I said earlier on, a lot of boards in the game will not just end on monsters. They'll have back row, they'll have hand traps, field spells, and so Dark Ruler will unfortunately not solve most of the problem, but I do think for most decks in the game, if they can get rid of the monsters, they're gonna have a great time. And so with cards that float, that is the issue, where again your tournament is going to get more popular as well. So this card is going to deal with the board, but there's going to be new threats coming on the board after, and I think that is the issue with Dark Ruler no more. So I'm going to put in the A tier still because I think it is a great blanket board breaker for a lot of decks, but I do think Droplet is the more technical, potentially better version. But again, gotta respect Dark Ruler. I'm going to put in the A tier for now. Let's move on to the next one, Dark Hole. So Dark Hole is pretty infamous, and we saw a lot of use for it in the Kashtira format, and it beats Ibli, which is I think the best part about this card. And so for that reason, I'm actually going to shotgun Dark Hole into the B tier, and I'm going to shotgun Raigeki into the C tier. There's no way I could put it in D tier, simply because it will still break the opponent's board, but in the Unchained matchup, it triggers them. Enemy Controller is actually a really cool one because you can play this in most decks and get away with negations being dodged. Imperm is once again being the most popular hand trap, but with Enemy Controller, you can dodge it. And so imagine playing on the opponent's turn, summoning something like a Rhinoheart, for example, they activate Imperm, tribute, take control of something, Rhinoheart will send something, trigger Tournament Fusion. That's just one example of how powerful this card is, but also in the Rescue Ace deck, this card is amazing. I really think this card is high value. It's hard to say if it's in S tier, I think that's a bit ambitious. It is just a side deck card, but when it does go off, it is actually incredible. The battle position change is nice too. It stops Zeus plays. Next up is Evenly Matched. So again, Ibli is seeing way less usage. I think Rescue Ace is probably the main deck that still runs it to be evenly. And Lightning Storm, I think this card is fantastic. I'm going to put it in the S tier. Deals with the Chimera board, deals with the Unchained board, great into Rika as well, Fluunderies. There are so many matchups and reasons why we should be playing this card. I wonder if it will be main decked, and I know that was a trend when Kashtira was at full power. Okay, Droplets is a really fun one because Arisa got banned, and that means we now have access to one of the coolest cards in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! So I'm super excited about this one. I don't think it deserves the S spot. I think it's been in the shadows for too long, so it needs to get that momentum back before we can consider it again. But I'm going to put it in the A tier easily, because it is literally one of the most hype and broken cards in the game. But the fact you can stop counter traps, which are believed to be the best negation disruption in the game. Let's say you do chaining 1 Imperm in the draw phase, your opponent does something, chaining 2 droplets, send the Imperm. Your opponent cannot even activate Manadon Reframing. Imagine they're setting up the Calamity Lock with Crimson Dragon in the draw phase, well guess what, they can't respond. And I think that's pretty crazy, and so that is why I would love to put Droplets in the A tier. I just want to see this card being used in live streams. It's a hype card, and we need more of that in Yu-Gi-Oh! In my honest opinion, as far as watching it. Kaijus are really interesting because of purely, again, potentially being the best deck in the meta game. I'm going to put Kaijus in the A tier. I know that might be a bit controversial, but for most decks in the game, they will have 1 to maybe 3 threats. Doing Kaiju, a lot of other things, like for example, a Rescue Ace monster, They need a rescue on the field to use the traps. A simple and easy, effective method to get rid of things on the board. It's just unfortunate that sometimes it doesn't deal with all of them. And so the next card is Harpy's Feather Duster. So I'm going to put this in the same category as evenly matched. Some players are even main decking it. Again, the weakness is that it loses the virus and anti-spell, but I do think just looking at the data from a lot of decks in the YCS's, tournaments, you name it, it's in everyone's main or side deck. Just respecting Labyrinth, respecting a Rescue Ace. Again, a lot of decks do set a lot of back row now. It's just how it is. So yeah, I think this card is definitely in the S tier. You should be playing it. Some people enjoy Cosmic Cyclone, and I get that. Obviously, it beats anti-spell. And so for decks that really struggle to play through it, yeah, I could definitely see Cosmic Cyclone instead. I put Kaiju Slumber in here, even though the grave effect happens on the next turn, so you have to survive a turn to really get the use out of it. But it's a Dark Hole and a Kaiju in one. I feel like that definitely has some merit. But because sometimes finding the Kaiju is what you want in the end, I think for that reason I'm going to put it in the B tier. Because yeah, at the end of the day, the Kaiju is probably what you need in most cases. But I'm not going to lie, summoning a Kaiju to both fields may help some decks link climb as well as setting up OTKs. I know Mekanko likes to give Kaijus, Purely likes to give it as well, I think, because they can put things into attack, defense, half attack, OTK. So maybe this is even a purely side deck card in the future if people ibly them too much. I don't know. Kashtira Fenrir, I'm putting in the S tier. There's no reason why this card should not belong here. People were saying this card should have been limited purely because of the power it has. This card alone will win you games, and sometimes, especially in my previous OTSs, I was just playing Fenrir control and that won me some games. I mean, that's just how good it is. And it's also a counter to a lot of things in the meta game. If you activate Turbulent to special, when it's summoned, you Fenrir banish it face down. Same thing with Preventer, same thing with the Unchained cards. And the next card is Kurikara Divine Incarnate. So this is an interesting one. Obviously, it's the purely counter. If we're going to see a tournament rise up again because of the Banlist effects, it means this card will see less use, simply because, again, a lot of decks that float now, Unchained and Tournaments are decks that tend to float. And if they're going to get more popular, I think Kurikara will see less play because they won't see that much effectiveness. Nothing beats wiping a board with Kurikara than specialing their boss monster and winning the game. But again, the drawback of this card is they need to activate monster effects. So you're essentially trading your way to win to just summon a Kurikara. And so I don't know how I feel about that. I'm going to put it in the A tier for now. Lava Golem is an interesting one because many decks in the game, if not all decks, will end on minimum 2 monsters. I think Purely is the only exception. So I think it's a matter of the player knowing the opponent has Lava Golem, or reading they do and respecting it. And so I think that's where this card will either fall off or be insane. But the issue is a lot of decks in the metagame right now will need the normal summon, but in the same time, I don't think Unchained does. So I'm really curious where and how this card will be used in the modern format. And so I'm going to put this in the A tier. That's a bit controversial. Again, we got Kaijus in here, we got Kurikara in here, but for most decks, this may be the answer to wiping out the board. All right, Lightning Storm, we're putting in the S tier. I think it does have issues. Again, being a normal spell, it loses to virus and anti-spell. It also can lose to having an Ibly on your field, but not many decks are using that strategy at the moment. Every top deck is running this card in the side with 1 Duster, 2 Lightning Storm, and you can start to see why Konami semi-limited this card. There are a lot of back row heavy focused decks in the game right now, but you also have a way to blow out back row, and so a lot of decks will end on Link monsters, and so you're guaranteed to do some damage with this card. Pankratops is a strange one. I used to think this card was one of the best side deck cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just the most versatile thing in the game. It's 2600, so it can beat over Appaloosa, which I thought was quite cool. But also, it is that flexible back row popper, monster popper. It pops Skill Drain, but which is not as popular right now. It definitely has that Kashtira Fenrir similar power scale, but I don't think it's there yet. So I'm going to put in A tier. It can force the IP Masquerena, and so that's why I'm going to put this card in the A tier. Santa Claus is a Kaiju at the end of the day, but it's not a Kaiju anyone will ever play. But I believe Purely can play this to help OTK, but it's just super obscure. I'm going to put it in the C tier. I don't think it's useless. Okay, Sphere Mode is another strange one. In the right deck, this card is busted, but in the meta game, how many decks are really ending on 3 monsters? And the decks that are synchros that end on a lot of monsters, they're going to Calamity lock you anyway. So it's kind of redundant. I've lost this Sphere Mode quite a few times, so I know how powerful this card can be against the right deck. But the issue is, if someone is mindful of it, they definitely won't end on 3. And if that's the case, Sphere Mode is dead. And so for that reason, I'm going to put Sphere Mode in the C tier. These are not just power level, these are also how it's represented, how useful, consistent it can be. And so just because it's C tier doesn't mean it's terrible, just means it's not as consistent. So Super Polymerization is a really cool one, and I was half expecting this card to be here on the ban list just because of how absurd it is. But again, for some players, this is the reason why they can win games, because it is one of the best board breakers. Not being able to respond and summoning a Garura to do double bad damage, or summoning a Mud Dragon to protect yourself in the Rescue Ace combo. There's just so many reasons why this card is cool, and I like that it gives players a whole new extra deck toolbox to use. Dragon Acquist, Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, and even cards like the Cyburst Save Worm. So you know, I'm going to put in the S tier. I think it's a really cool card. Definitely can be super frustrating to play against. I agree with you there. It's great against Labyrinth. It's probably good against Unchained. And it's probably good against Rescue Ace. A lot of decks in the metagame right now do rely on just their archetypal attributes and types. And so you can get away with running this in the main deck and just taking people out. Now that Arisa is finally gone, this card has, you know, finally had its time to shine. It's increasing in price now. A lot of people are picking it up. A lot of people are looking at this card, but it is a going second card. And for that reason, I'm going to put this in the A tier. Again, this might be some bias for me. It's one of my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh cards in the modern format, but because it's a going second card, loses to Virus, loses to Anti-Spell, needs the specific card type on the field. But against a fusion matchup, it's amazing. Send Entis, send Garura, and your opponent cannot respond to it. It's not a once per turn, and you could argue the payoff for this card versus Super Poly are two very different things, and I think it might exist in the low A tier, high B tier. And the next card, I mean, this is the easiest decision I've ever made, and I think everyone will agree with me that Zeus is one of the best, if not the best board breaker in Yu-Gi-Oh, closely following Super Polymerization and maybe evenly matched. Zeus is just really infamous. It's actually limited in the OCG, I believe. As far as this format and what we can expect, I think this is the board breaker tier list for you to watch out on, and maybe keep an eye out when you are siding, teching, what you should expect for people to play. Age of Overlord is right around the corner, and I cannot wait to show you guys my Age of Overlord content. So with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.